You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy. MPL listeners, big announcement before we get into the episode. Because we had so much fun with our inaugural MPL Live event in Austin, we have decided to make MPL Live a recurring event that we do on a quarterly basis. And we've decided that our next in-person event will be in Miami on December 10th. The theme of the event will be the manager dilemma, and we've got another all-star lineup in store. We'll have 3 former MPL guests, Melanie Naranjo, who's the Chief People Officer at Athena. Shout out Melanie, she just got promoted. Dominic Boone, the VP of Talent and Org Development at Liberty Latin America, and Cleo Knowles, the Chief People Officer at SH Hotels. And then we're going to have 2 newbies to the MPL world, so brand new guests to the show. Rosanna Durthy, the VP of Global Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at LinkedIn, and Jen Fisher, who is the former Chief Wellbeing Officer at Deloitte. It's going to be the exact same format from MPL Live Austin. We got really good feedback. People seemed really happy with the 2 hours of networking that we save after the live podcast. Early bird tickets are on sale for $150, but we do have a special treat for our listeners. You can use our exclusive discount code MPL-Live-50 and snag your ticket for just $75. Early bird pricing will end on October 31st, and we only have 15 early bird tickets left. So if you plan on being there, go get your ticket now. We really hope that we see you guys there. This could be a fun event to fly in for, or if you are Miami-based and you want to bring your entire team, shoot me a DM on LinkedIn. I can offer some group ticket pricing. But yeah, we're really looking forward to this event and hope to see you guys in Miami. Oh, yeah, by the way, the link to go register is going to be in the show notes. So just click into the show notes and you can find the link there. All right, now back to the show.
Jenna, welcome to the Modern People Leader.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's so awesome to have you. We were on a call earlier and we mentioned that Daniel and I try to be super intentional about the guests, the companies that we have on the show. And we have a soft spot in our heart for the local Austin startup community. And we try to set aside conversations specifically so we can highlight people leaders here in our hometown. And so super stoked to have an Austin-based, you, the Chief People Officer of an Austin-based company on the show today. It's been a while. So
yeah,
thanks for joining us. I'm sure listen to the show. We have a lot of traditions, the first of which is what we call good news stories. And we all go around, share a personal work-related story, just a way of starting the show off with a little positivity and gratitude. So we prefer for our guests to go first. So I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, I was thinking about what is a good news story when you said that. And from my professional and personal life, I felt like really collided over the last week, because last week I brought my whole people team across AlertMedia together for a 2-day onsite. And what I loved about it was we did, instead of doing just normal recognition, we decided to do recognition superlatives for each of our team members and recognize them through kind of creative things, from like the Wonder Woman award to like our Dark Knight award, and talking about like what that means. And but what I loved about it, it was a fast follow with this exercise about what are you most proud that you achieved this past year. And it was amazing to hear each of my team members just talk about the pride they had in the work that they were doing and the impact they were having. And while I could have told them all the things that I recognize them, there's just something really amazing about hearing what someone's most proud of in themselves. And it's funny, I went to my daughter's parent-teacher conference. She's almost 5. And the teacher was saying that my daughter always asks, "Are you proud of me?" when she completes something. And her response back is always, "Well, Zoe, are you proud of yourself?" And I think that that's really important, right? It's like it's just as important to recognize others as it is to just like take that reflection and recognize yourself, be proud of yourself and what you've achieved. But it was cool to see kind of my personal and professional life come to life in that way.
I mean, you have to tell us yours. What was your superlative?
Oh, I don't even know what it was called. Oh, hold on. I can tell you. I had the Care Bear Award. Um,
Yes.
yes. That was also what was cool. No certificates. This year it was all about like different like physical figurines that recognize them. So like one of my team members got the Sherlock Holmes Award. She is like our amazing problem solver. If you need an investigation to figure out what is causing a problem, my HR operational manager is for sure the Sherlock Holmes of the team. But mine was the Care Bear Award, and anyone who knows me knows like I deeply care. I deeply care about my employees. I deeply care about the success of our organization. I deeply care about humans, which makes it so perfect that I'm working for AlertMedia because that's what we do every day. So yeah, that's me. That's my good moment.
Love it.
Steven,
Daniel, I
I
know
I
you.
don't want to get us too off track, but like what would you say your superlative would be? Or if it's
That
easier, you can give
is,
me mine and I can give you yours.
I was going to, the word scrappy is like scrappy dog. Like, I don't know what
Happy
the
do.
right, yeah, scrappy do. I don't know what the right character is, but that is what I would choose for you lately because we've had to be like super scrappy in a lot of different ways.
Mm.
I can't think of like a cartoon character or the right name for this, but like I can, I guess, get really in my head and question everything. And sometimes that leads to me not being like the most confident because I'm like, we could do this, we could do that. It always feels like there's a better option that I'm just not considering. And I feel like Steven has like supreme confidence. And like once we like make a decision, like there's a lot of confidence in that decision. I can't think of a good superlative for that. Like, I don't know. We'll have to do some thinking on it, but that would be yours, Steven.
I like it. I'll take it. On the good news topic, my good news, it is, I'm really excited for our Miami event. So we did our first MPL live recording in Austin. It was amazing. We had a great turnout, great guests, and we just finalized our guest list for the presenters for MPL Live Miami. And I don't want to steal thunder, but it's an amazing group. And I'm just like, there's something, I guess, like energizing. There's something super energizing about the formation stages of an event. It's like we've worked our way through the kind of pain and trauma that's actually like day of the actual delivery of the event. And now we're kind of back up. And so I'm swinging back into the excitement mode for MPL Live Miami. That's my good news.
It's funny how we experience that very differently. Like, the painful part for me is like this part. It's like, oh shit, like we have this huge event that we have to put on. Like, there's so many things that we have to do. And then the day of, I don't know, it feels a little bit more relieving. But my good news would be I'm going to go personal. And it's that we have biggest games ever for Texas football here in Austin as a home game. We are number 1 and Georgia's number 5. It's a 6:30 game. The temperature at kickoff is going to be like 76 degrees. The fact that it's an evening game. So I'm so excited for this game. This is something that I've been looking forward to for months now. And yeah. And then I guess on the work side, like Steven said, I feel like we're in a good flow with work and we're getting things done. We're being scrappy. We're figuring out new things or new ways of approaching everything we're doing in the business. And that's really exciting for me.
I So two things. So one would be is I'm loving the upsets happening in college football. So not to ruin your good moment, I'm kind of
Ooh,
hoping for an
no, she
upset this
didn't.
weekend.
No, she did not just do that and
We got
threw
to end
some
this
bad
recording right
juju.
now.
Yeah.
I'm the Ohio State University alum. Like Last week was
Oh,
really hard, right? It was an upset. That's all you
one
could
point
call it.
loss. Like, I think if y'all keep winning, y'all should make the playoff, but that's
Yes. And we'll
tough.
beat them in
Yeah.
the next game. I get it.
Yeah. I think y'all will. I feel like
um,
that's usually how it goes.
yes, I
So
agree.
we are already like 15 minutes in. We haven't even gotten to the meat of the convo. But before we do that, like, I just want to hear your story. What's the Jenna story? How did you end up in Austin? How did you end up at AlertMedia? How did you end up in the HR space now as a chief people officer? Like, give us the full story.
Yeah, I always say I'm a unicorn, right? A lot of people fall into HR, and that's not me. I knew I wanted to go into HR as soon as I was an undergrad. I went and got my business undergrad from the Ohio State University, and I specialized in HR, but I didn't want to be that kid who graduated from college without knowing what I wanted to do. So I interned in HR all throughout college and did a few roles with Boeing and learned all about airplanes, met my husband, and at that point, it was okay, do I go to Boeing full time or do I pursue my master's in HR and keep going down this path? And I ended up going to Cornell. I got my master's in HR. And what I loved about Cornell was the Center for Advanced Human Resource Studies is there. And it was really cool to be surrounded by all the HR research happening around the world, right? Top CHROs from like the companies that I really admired were sitting in front of us as students to tell us like, what does a career in HR look like? What does a great HR leader look like? And for me, I was really inspired that I could have so many careers in HR. It wasn't one dimensional. It was this multidimensional career that I could have. And one of the things that I really love when I look back at my career is I've worked in so many industries and I've worked for different size companies, different public to privately held to PE backed companies. And when I went out of grad school, I went to General Mills. And when I think about what was so important to me in there was I went to a mission driven company where I had this tangible product that I really believed in. I believed in their mission of nourishing lives. I was going to be an HR leader in an organization that really built great HR. I wanted early on to understand what is the deep foundational skill set that makes a great HR leader. And I think General Mills, what I always have so much gratitude for, they gave me all the skills of what it meant to understand all dimensions of HR early on in my career. So working in the supply chain, understanding what it's like to serve a manufacturing environment from a operational workforce to a white collared workforce in the same place, and you're really running a business, right? You understand how critical kind of cost savings are in that environment, right? Because every dollar matters. But B, just the way in which you think about your HR practices, you have to really adapt to these differentiated populations and these people from different socioeconomic environments and different skill sets. And I just really appreciated that. And I did a number of roles with General Mills, from HR business partner roles, supporting Yoplait, supporting Pillsbury. But then I went into a learning leader role. And it was really cool for me to think about like I had just driven a huge HR org change and we'd done a lot of transformation and changing what is the jobs that people do. And then I was given the opportunity to say, now go teach those people to be successful, train and develop them, grow them, help them unlock the potential you saw in them as you made that transformation and selected them for those roles. And so for me, when I think about that moment, it was great HR people take on different jobs within the HR space and build their depth and expertise in different spaces. For me, when I look at kind of thematically, what was most pivotal in that moment was I was building upon the depth of expertise I was building in talent development and in learning and development. And this idea that you can unlock the potential in anybody if you train them, you develop them, you coach them effectively to be successful. And then I decided I wanted to stay in Los Angeles. I had moved to LA with General Mills. I left Minneapolis on a negative 50-degree day. I landed on an 80-degree day in Los Angeles. I loved the sunshine. I loved not being cold. I got married. And for me, it was okay, I think I'm going to stay in LA. And I went into financial services and I went to work for a company called Capital Group. And what I loved about Capital Group is I'd worked for these huge corporations. And to go to a privately held, kind of a little bit smaller, about 7,500 people, but an organization that deeply valued their people, that the values that the founders started, that the family that started the company 85 plus years ago had still instilled those values and how the culture really looked and felt for each of their employees every day. And to be a leader, that really is the steward of culture in HR, right? We're the stewards of the culture. We don't own the culture, but we're the stewards and cultivators of the culture. And I thought what I loved about that experience is another industry that was super interesting. Like I loved learning about the business, but B, again, like feeling really deeply connected to the values of the organization. And it wasn't just about what you do, but how you work and how you help people be successful in their jobs and organizations. And then it was time. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I loved the tech space. I was an HR leader in the technology organization at Capital Group. And I had an opportunity to go into, startup tech world. And so I went to work for a restaurant tech company as their chief people officer. And I think what was really exciting about that opportunity is they had done a ton of mergers and acquisitions prior to my arrival. And it was the first time where I had to take a step back and say, hey, there's no more definition of what the practices of HR or what I have to do. It's what is the right thing for this organization? How do I deeply understand this business? And what is the CPO role that I need to play for this organization at the stage that they're at? And so thinking about the dimensions of culture, kind of how do you help 5 organizations come together as one culture under kind of a consistent set of values? And then also, how do you help them build their HR infrastructure? And so I say like that was my year of building, and I loved building. That was why I really wanted to go into the tech space, is I really enjoyed helping organizations grow and scale and build and be creative and try things that I couldn't really do in corporate America. And I had a great year. And then I had a baby. And then after I had that baby, I really wanted to go find a mission-driven company. I wanted a mission-driven company that their values really aligned with my values, and they were doing something that really made an impact on the world. And so my baby was probably, 12 weeks old, and I had a 2.5-year-old little girl, and we moved our family to Austin, Texas, which is fabulous. I agree. And I started with AlertMedia, and I will tell you, I couldn't have dreamed this job more perfectly for myself. I truly feel like I found my dream job. And it's not just about the job, it's the people you do it with, but it's also about the mission of the organization and the fact that every day when I go home, I know this organization helped to save lives today. And I just think that is probably one of the most compelling missions I ever could have been a part of and be able to contribute to every day. And that's my story. Here's where I am.
I love your story. This is the first time I've heard it because I wasn't able to join in our intake call. And there are so many things that I relate to and connect with. But I think you are probably our third, maybe fourth intentional HR person, meaning that you knew early on or heading into career that you wanted to be in HR. And so that says something. There are only a few of those badges that we've given out. You get one of those badges. And
Pat Waters is one that comes to mind.
Pat Waters, yeah, it is very good company. So that was the first thing that jumped out. The second thing is the way you describe General Mills. I don't know if it's because of the consumer packaged goods. Like, I think both of these companies fall into that category or industry, but it reminded me of how other guests have talked about PepsiCo and their time at PepsiCo. And there's a whole branch of PepsiCo HR leaders that are like this huge branch of very successful HR people that were all under this original CHRO that have now gone to like all these different places. We probably had a dozen or so of those guests on our show. And so we've heard that story quite a bit. And General Mills sounds a lot like that, kind of that experience of getting every back to front office experience, diverse workforce in terms of like the traditional definitions of diversity, but also like you have hourly employees, people that are stocking, and but you also have technologists. So that was something else that jumped out at me. The question I have for you, the follow up, is you have jumped around quite a bit. Like you've worked at large companies, you've worked at mid-sized companies, and now you are in the startup world. And it sounds like that's going super well. Like, what do you think has been the one trait that has served you well in navigating being a successful HR practitioner in all three of those settings that are very different in terms of you said something that really struck me. You mentioned like, what are the things that we should be doing given our stage of the company? And so I'm just curious, like, what has enabled you to be able to kind of flex and adapt so well?
Yeah, I think it's three things. So, one is I'm not afraid to learn something new. Like, you can do anything hard. That's my motto, right? Like, you can do hard things. And so for me, I've really pursued a lot of just different challenges, even if I didn't know how to do it, and said, like, I'm going to learn something new and I'm going to be better for this. I might make mistakes, it might be really hard, but I know whether it's really good or really bad, I'm going to learn and I'm going to be better before it. And I think that served me really well. I think the second piece is I never went down one path. And what I mean by that, well, I guess I mean two things on that. So one is I believe great HR leaders deeply understand their business. They deeply understand what does the business do? What is the product? And I will tell you in every job, I go so far outside of my boundaries. And I always say like every CPO isn't for every CEO. And I would tell anybody that, right? I think finding that match is important because I'm that person who doesn't stay in my lane. I love to learn. I love to contribute. What I love about HR is, yes, am I responsible for kind of the human dimension of the business and the talent dimension of the business? Absolutely. And I will do that every day. But my value is also deeply understanding my business and being able to contribute in a variety of different ways and doing that. Like today, I was standing in the break room and we have a bunch of guests on site are from portfolio companies within our PE-backed company. And I started pitching AlertMedia to one of the leaders and saying why. I said, hey, do you have AlertMedia? Like, are you our customer? And they said, no, we're not. And I said, and I just literally started pitching them, right? I would have never, right? At no point in my career had I ever learned the sales pitch, right? To pitch a product. But I've never felt so deeply inspired and connected to a product like I do today. And I jump into sale mode all the time. Is that my job? Maybe, probably not to most people, but that's my job to me. And so I don't know. I use that as an example that I know is silly, but just to say is I don't stay in my lane. I take on the hard things even if I don't know how to do them, and I keep on doing that. And even in my HR career, I've tried all different like roles in HR, right? From kind of org effectiveness to talent development to learning and development, getting some like compensation experiences, but like my core is being an HRBP, but never losing sight of like you have to have the breadth just as much as you have to have depth and like try things to do it. You don't have to change jobs to do it. You just have to like attack the opportunities to learn and grow within the scope of what you're doing.
So you mentioned that, today you were in the break room and you went into
Dan-
sales mode.
Daniel,
And
I'm going to interrupt because I don't know if it's
We
just
can't
me,
hear
but
you.
you sound very echo. When you said Pat Waters
Oh,
earlier, there we go.
here we go.
There we
I
go.
forgot.
Yeah.
I'm used to using my mic that's up here, but I have the handheld today.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for reminding me. So earlier, you mentioned that occasionally you'll break into sales mode, like today in the break room, and I feel like that's the perfect segue to our next question. Like, I want to hear like what's the elevator pitch? Like, if you were to meet a stranger and they asked you, "What do you do? What does your company do?" Like, what's the quick explanation of what Alert Media does?
Yeah. So Alert Media helps companies keep their people safe. So we're in a world right now that's a little bit scary, right? There are natural disasters, there are active shooter situations, there are obviously like various crises that are unforeseen in the world. Our organization helps companies communicate two-way with their employees, no matter where they are in the world, to understand what are the threats being presented to them. So, what are the threats and risks? Hey, I'm confirming there's a hurricane coming. Are you evacuating? Are you safe? How can we support you? And I think why that's so important. What I think the reason why I love what we do and why I feel so connected to it is because that's my job. My job as a CHRO is I'm going to go back because that's not my title here. My job as an HR leader is to ensure the safety and well-being of my workforce. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my role. And what I love is Alert Media helps me do that in my r right? As the primary administrator of my product, I touch my product all the time. Hopefully not as much as as little as possible. But the reality is we've had multiple hurricanes happening, and being able to talk to all my employees in Florida within seconds and make sure they're safe, that gives me peace of mind, and knowing that we're doing right by our people, and they're going to show up every day because they're going to know we care about them.
And would you consider, I love this product, and obviously I've known about AlertMedia for a while, just being in the Austin SaaS high tech ecosystem. Would you consider this like a work tech or HR technology? Like, where does if I'm a company out there listening to this episode that's like, wow, like we've needed something like this, but like, who do you consider your buyer of type of solution?
Yeah, it's a great question. What I love about this solution is I think there's a lot of buyers, right? I think the CHRO is a buyer. And I didn't allude to this earlier, but my sister is also a CHRO, and she's older than me. So she inspired my career in a lot of ways. And so I didn't just happen to fall into HR. I was inspired by my older sister.
Oh my
Um,
God. Can we have a follow-up episode with you and your sister? I don't think we've had
100%.
sister heads of HR on the show. Okay. Side note for
Totally.
future episode idea, but keep going. Sorry.
She would love that. But she bought Alert Media before I knew Alert Media, because she was a CHRO for a 5,000 person workforce. And they were having a series of different situations that they were saying, we don't have a way to urgently communicate to our people to keep them safe. And so, that's a great example of like a CHRO does have a duty of care. Like, we do have a responsibility to understand, where are people in the world? Are they safe? Are they going to be okay? Yes, because we care about their safety and well-being, but also from a business continuity standpoint, if half your workforce is down, how do you keep your business going if you're serving customers, all over the world for different purposes that need to happen, that are essential? But so you have your CHRO persona, obviously your safety and security persona, right? Your safety
Mm-hmm.
leaders, your CISOs, your heads of security. Naturally, they have an obligation to the physical safety and well-being of their workforces, whether they're on sites and keeping their sites safe, whether it is you have a distributed remote workforce. And so even more, a two-way form of communication in an emergency situation is really critical, right? To making sure they're okay.
Like I said, I love it. And my next question is more specific about the employee experience at Alert Media. And I've been anxiously awaiting this question, because you told us how you got to your answer before we hit record. And so, why should we be jealous that you get to work for Alert Media?
Yeah. And for everybody listening, I shared that I asked this question of a lot of people today when I was walking around our office, just because I was curious, like, what were the themes that were going to come up? Were they going to be different? Were they going to be the same? And there's like two things. So, what I loved is that my personal response to that question was so well aligned to the two themes that I heard in that conversation, right? I think a lot of organizations, a lot of people, when you ask that question, will say the people, right? That the people are really like what you should be jealous of. I 100% believe that. I've never worked with such exceptional people who deeply care about humans. But more importantly, I think it really goes back to our mission, right? We make a difference every day. There's so many companies that you can work for. There's very few that you can know that every day your product and what you do is helping humanity, right? It's helping to make the world a better place. It's helping to prevent people from getting hurt. I just think saving lives is, right, a very compelling reason to come to work and feel like you're making a difference every day. And I feel really proud that I can do that.
That's awesome. And so this next segment we call the State of the Union for HR, for work. And it's a segment that we've recently brought back. We didn't include it for a few months, but given all of the things that are going on in the world right now, like we talked about the hurricanes, we have the elections, we have tougher environment for startups, like there's like a lot of factors that I think HR leaders are having to deal with right now, doing more with less. burnout. Like we're going to talk about some of these things, but how would you sum up the state of HR right now based on the people that you're talking to? Like what's the vibe that you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, I think while so much has changed, there's a lot of things that continue to remain the same, right? The speed of change and driving transformation in organizations is at an all-time high, right? It's the external factors you hit on. It is in that ever-changing kind of external landscape, economically, politically, socially, right? Everything's happening at super speed, right? And so I think HR is trying to figure out how do we need to what are the conversations happening in the workplace, right? Because of those external factors, how do we need to evolve and change our practices from a people standpoint to really ensure that we're prepared, that we're being proactive to maintain a high performing, highly engaged workforce. And I think the undertone of that is all those things impact you at a very personal level. And that person is coming into the workplace every day, right? And there are a lot of distractions. And so I would say, like, when I think about the state of HR, it's getting at all those pieces, right? How do you continue to build high performing, highly engaged workforces with all these factors of change happening? And part of it is what are your stable moments, right? What are the things that you're just going to hold true to and like create stability within your workforce? And then where, based off of your organizational strategy, do you need to continue to transform and change? And how do you create a more change agile workforce that isn't fearful of it, but they're really excited about that? And so I think change management continues to be a really crucial skill set for HR leaders. I think staying ahead at like what's coming in the horizon that is going to impact our workforce and how do we need to evolve and change to adapt to that. I think that engaging and developing leaders is probably one of the most critical priorities across everyone. And yes, it always has been. But, I'm a firm believer your managers are your force multipliers. If they're not strong, if they're not prepared, if they're not informed, especially in moments like this in the world where there's ever, all these change and all this information being thrown at them, then your organization can't move forward. Your managers truly play that crucial role in helping you drive through that change, drive that transformation, whatever it might be. And so for me as an HR leader is how are we equipping them to be successful for us?
That's actually going to be your last point. We have bucketed it into a topic called the manager dilemma.
Mhm.
And part of the manager dilemma already existed pre-COVID. It just
Yes.
is, it's hard to be a manager. The tool sets, the tools that are the work tech stack has never really catered to the manager, although the manager has all the important steps in our workflows, meaning HR isn't the approver of things. Guess who's the approver of things? The manager, usually, right? And so, if anything, the last HR tech cycle only added steps and work to the manager's plate. Yeah, and I think that's the right model. I think that things have to be optimized to this potential force multiplier. It can also have the opposite impact, and herein lies the dilemma that when you do not enable your managers to work effectively, or you don't provide them with the tools, it will hold you back. It will be the opposite of a force multiplier. And so I want to dig into that a little bit. So what are some of the things that you all are doing to ensure that you are creating a force multiplier effect and not the opposite and like a bottleneck, or even worse, slowing the business down?
Yeah. So one of our values is simplicity is our strength. And when I think about leadership development, it's that. Can you make it simple? Because to your point is managers have so many jobs. They have so many jobs and it's overwhelming. And so sometimes I understand where that dilemma comes from, right? And so when we think about how we grow our leaders and some of the leadership development programs that we built, it's starting with this foundation of leading with care. Like, are you building deep, trusted relationships with your people? Do you understand what their personal and professional motivations are? Do you know what's keeping them up at night outside of the workplace? Because the more that you're in tune to that, the more effective you're going to be at helping to support them to bring their best when they're at work, right? Where we spend a lot of time at work. But there is something really real about what happens outside of work does not stay at work, does not stay outside of work. And so I think if you teach leaders how to lead with care and with empathy, to seek with understand, to lead with radical candor, I think those are really the core tenets of that foundation that helps them be more successful in all the other topics that we throw their way.
So when I think about, I guess, the delivery method for how you're training and developing these managers, I'm still kind of gathering my thoughts from HR Tech, the conference a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like there's like companies spawning up left and right that are trying to tackle this problem. You have some people that think it's creating like a AI like manager coaching bot. You have other people that still like firmly believe that it's like in-person training, or at least like in-person virtual training. You have others that are very much believers in online courses. Like there's so many different,
Some think it's a
delivery
coaching. Yeah, some think it's a
Yeah, the
coaching, which is
coaching
like
model. I
right,
know.
coaching
right,
model.
yeah.
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 And I feel like that if I were having to set a budget for this as a people leader, that would be kind of confusing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about it? Like, I imagine that you're doing multiple of those things, but like, how do you go about putting together a manager development like strategy? Like,
Yeah.
walk us through that process for you.
And which of the tools do you consider? Because just to add on, another trend that we're hearing from HR leaders is like less tech and more lo-fi solutions. Like let's move quickly and not have to deal with an implementation and a rollout and an engagement. So I'm just curious there as well. Like
Yeah.
what solutions are you looking at?
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer. I do it all, which I know is probably not everyone's favorite answer, but you need a mix of it all. And it's fit for purpose, right? It's trained for purpose, understanding which of those different modes is most effective for what do you want that person to walk away with. And so, for example, like we launched our leadership development called Leading at Alert about a year and a half ago. We built it all homegrown from ground up. And what I loved about it is we talked to all the leaders across the company to really understand from our executive team, from our senior leadership team, what were the most critical and capability gaps of our leaders, and how do we build a program that gets at that? And so we built an in-person, about 2.5 day workshop that took people through those programs, but we had leaders across the business partner with our people team to co-facilitate it, to bring practical examples from leaders across the organization and hear from diverse voices about the different ways that leadership shows up for these critical topics. And now we're building our emerging leaders program. And our emerging leaders program is all focused on that high potential, high aspiration individual contributor who wants to be a manager one day. How do we help them build the skills and capabilities now before they get into that role that helps them accelerate their success? And as we're doing that, we've actually talked about using kind of a multimodal approach. So some of it is in person with kind of that in person cross functional leadership engagement. Part of it actually is leveraging an external third party partner to bring in an external facilitator to lead out a program from a leadership development company that is an expert and it has facilitators on staff that hit on specific topics like emotional intelligence or influential communication, right? The really core tenets to what makes someone a great leader. And I'm really excited to launch that program in 2025 because I think that this kind of multi-pronged approach is the right thing. Like having a balanced approach where like that 2 day, it just like check the box doesn't work for training. They're not retaining anything. They're overwhelmed as soon as it ends and what they have to go catch up on, and they lose a lot of it. And so, for example, we also do virtual follow up sessions for 90 days after our leadership development program, where we bring them together to either practice something that they needed to practice more on from those sessions, to explore a topic that they felt like we didn't go deep enough in. And so catering your training and development to the learners and what are they asking you for? What are they saying they're not getting enough of? And actually being more flexible around learning and development catered to your audience and what is the critical needs that they have at that moment. I will
I
say
love
for the
it.
for your technology question though, I
Yeah.
think I'm not a believer in like send people to LinkedIn Learning. Sorry, LinkedIn, I apologize. I'm just
Plus
not a
one.
believer in it. Do I think that it is a tool and a resource that has value? Yes. Do I think it can be the only one? I don't.
And
I don't.
it's like for point solutions or point needs. Like, I
Yes.
don't know anyone who's like, you know what, this year in 2025, I'm setting the goal of focusing on my personal development, my leadership development. And I don't think anyone's thinking, I'm going to go take a LinkedIn learning class to do that. Like, I just think there are like basic needs. It's kind of a Maslow's type of thing. I have basic
Mhm.
learning needs that I might
Yes.
go to LinkedIn Learning, but I need the course. Company, you need to be better. If you really are truly looking at me, developing me as a leader at this company, and you want to retain me, you need to be doing more and not putting all the onus on me. And I won't go to, like Daniel knows, 2 years ago, the trend was your L&D has to be scalable. And if it's not scalable, don't talk to me. Don't, if I'm a CFO, like I don't want to see it. And now I think we're seeing the, repercussions of going all in on this approach, this LinkedIn learning approach, this online learning approach, that it's not meeting the needs. And I think there were suspicions back then. And I love to hear that it's a mixed approach, because I personally think that's the right model.
Yeah, skills change too quickly, right? Like the demands in the workplace around like what skills you need to be successful is really fast, right? With AI, right? We're changing how we think about how we solve problems. Like, in my offsite last week, we talked about we did a whole workshop around AI and what are the HR use cases. And what I
Mm-hmm.
tried to reinforce with my team is it's not about replacing, it's about identifying where are those opportunities to leverage AI because your highest and greatest use and value of time is not there. And so carving out being able to use AI for some of those pieces enables you to create capacity in your day to tackle some of the things you never got to tackle that have the greatest impact on our business. And that's energizing. It's not scary. And so I don't know, part of me would say is I would rather people double down on what are the things that can be simply solved for me so that I can really tackle things that I really need to deeply learn because that's my greatest value.
I know we're going like completely off topic, but you mentioned
We
the
promised
offsite.
we would.
You mentioned the offsite a couple of times. Remind me, was this a team offsite? Was it an executive offsite?
Yeah, it was my whole people team.
Okay.
So we all came together for 2 days last week. Ironically, I actually was at an executive summit with my whole executive team the 3 days prior. And so I feel
Okay.
like I had like my dream week of my two teams all together to like learn together, to grow together, to bond together. I think that
And
time is
so,
important. I would say that's the only thing. If you're an HR leader and you're not bringing your teams together, your executive team on an ongoing basis to do quarterly business reviews and engage and connect and build deeper relationships, you're not doing your job. If you're not doing that for your people team at least once a year, I don't know, you cannot underestimate the value of that face-to-face connection and the relationship equity that you build in it.
I
That's
agree.
another force multiplier.
Yeah, and I love like the team offsites. If you're comfortable sharing, I'd love for you to walk us through what that week looked like. Both the 3-day executive summit and the people team offsite. Maybe we have some people leaders that haven't scheduled their people team offsite for Q4 yet, and they're looking for ways of like, switching it up. Like, give us the rundown of what the week looked like.
Yeah. So I started my week. I ended up actually doing one-on-ones with various kind of CHRO peers to just connect and learn about what are they working on. At AlertMedia, we're growing around the world right now. We're growing our team in Mexico. We're growing our team in the UK, growing our team in the US. We're growing our team in Ireland. And so for me, I spent a lot of time talking to my peers about what are those best practices of how you grow and scale in these new countries from an HR infrastructure standpoint, but also just how do you build global teams that can engage and connect and bring out their best with each other, no matter where they're sitting in the world? So I think that was really interesting for me to hear how different organizations are doing that. We went through a series of different programs offered by our PE firm with our executive peers from other portfolio companies. And what I always love about that is you get to hear from different executives about how they're solving similar problems in different ways. I always say, like, everybody has maybe the similar outcome, but how they get there could be a completely different journey. And there's learning and growth and success in all of it. And so it was great to hear, the different journeys of different organizations across kind of the SaaS environment. I also always enjoy spending time with my CHRO peers. So we did a series of roundtables on topics such as use cases for how HR organizations are integrating AI in our people practices. How are we building highly engaged workforces? So what are those engagement tools and capabilities that people are finding most successful now that they maybe weren't using or weren't effectively using in the past? How are we building high performance work cultures? So what does pay for performance mean, right? What does building a strong performance based culture look like? And how do you help people be their best, either through individual development, through growth, through coaching, right? We were talking about the coaching model, through mentorship programs that you establish as organizations, which for us has been incredibly impactful across our company, right? Those types of topics, just to learn from people that are doing the same type of work, but in different ways. And then my people team offsite I shared with you before was a look back at 2024. What did we accomplish? What did we do? What did we set out to accomplish? What did we accomplish? And what did we do? What did we learn? And I shared in earlier, they talked about what they're most proud of, but the ask was also, what did you learn this year? Because I think if we're not talking about our learning, then we're not getting better. And so it was great to hear just what people are proud of and what they're learning along the way. And then we talked about what our 2025 priorities are. Where are we going? And what was really good is we started with, what is our business strategy? What is AlertMedia focused on in 2025? What does the business need most from us? And what does our human capital strategy look like to enable us to achieve those priorities that the business has set out? And then how do each of us in different ways feel connected to that broader organizational strategy? Because for me, I'm not a firm believer of cascading goals. I just never have believed in them. But I'm a firm believer is, if you deeply understand your business strategy, where you're going, why you're going there, and then you have an HR strategy that then enables that, then your people should be able to identify within each of their core roles how they feel connected to that. And it was really amazing to hear how my team talked about their priorities and objectives going into 2025 that enable us to achieve those priorities. And so coming together as cross-functional teams to talk about what that priority looks like and what we're going to do about it, but also doing that self-reflection of, how do I contribute to that?
I love that. I love the agenda. Thank you for sharing that. Our audience loves kind of behind the scenes views into how teams and HR leaders are structuring these types of offsites and playbooks. So thanks for sharing so much detail. Like, there's so much I want to ask about and dig into, but we need to turn the corner to the end of the conversation soon. We're not quite there yet. And I guess the segue is really on the topic of looking forward to 2025. One of the questions that we're going to skip today is, what is keeping you up at night? And I'm going to answer this with one of the things that's keeping me up at night, and that is HR leader burnout, or just HR practitioner burnout. And this is a topic that seems to be, it's been choppy over the last few years. So there have been ups and downs, mainly downs, if we're honest, but we're kind of like in this up and down in the kind of down segment. But it's feeling particularly down right now. And I don't know if it's because we have an election right around the corner. I know there's a lot of stress right now just around what that's going to mean from an employee relations and employee comms perspective. But I just want to zoom out. That's just one example. Why do you think we are at this place where burnout is such an issue with HR leaders? And, what do you think it's going to take to get out of this?
Yeah. I think to your point is, it's been this compounding effect over the last, I don't know, 6 years, right? Daniel and I talked about how there's the COVID era. HR people put everyone's life jackets on and put their own on last. Our role changed massively during that time, right? Like all of a sudden, the role of HR to care for the well being and safety of the workplace and think about how you use technology differently, how do you connect with people differently, how do you think about benefits differently, right? There was literally everything you had to think about, like revisiting and reimagining how you serve your workforce. And it wasn't just about how they do their work, it was about how are you going to keep them safe. And I think that created, a very interesting dilemma for us as an HR organization, and kind of getting through that where people had very emotional reactions naturally, right, in a pandemic. So having to manage through those emotions and stay objective and change things pretty drastically, to the post COVID era, right? The war for talent. You had to change all your compensation practices. You had to grow rapidly. You had to fight for talent, not just to find them, but to retain them after you had just done a bunch of risks during COVID. And so you get through your war for talent, your compensation model is completely screwed from it. You are exhausted because you've just hired and onboarded a ton of people and now have to help them be successful. And by the way, probably 20 to 30% of them weren't successful, or they already left because they found another job. And then, oh, hey, you all of a sudden you see all the economy is shifting. Organizations realize they hired too many people and they start mass rifts, right? And all of a sudden, all the work you just did became 10 times harder because you now have to do the most difficult thing an HR person has to do. You have to lead a strategy for how you're going to exit people and impact their livelihoods, right? Because the business needs you to do it. And then you get through that. And then you get to this stable moment of like, okay, the talent market is doing okay, but you have an interesting economy, going back to where you started. You have a weird political environment right now. You have wars all over the world. You have, right, all those pieces. Well, yes, I'm like, they impact everybody, but that impacts the workplace. That impacts every human. That impacts how your organizations are going to grow and scale, where you grow and scale. It impacts where you have your workforce in the world, and how do you think about what your kind of geographic location of your business strategy is and what makes sense for you. You have to think, if you're a manufacturing organization, what does my supply chain look like, right? And so all these business decisions have people implications. And so are HR leaders tired? They're really tired, right? Because they've had to navigate some of the hardest things and keep everybody else going through that from a people standpoint. And when I think about, I'm just going to call it like the light at the end of the tunnel, I think a lot of HR leaders chose to leave the workforce. Like the number of CHROs who are in fractional and interim CHRO jobs today is unlike anything I ever imagined for our function. I personally think it's actually really cool. I think it's exciting that organizations are getting these different HR perspectives, but also that CHROs can create their own journeys. They can choose what companies they want to work for. They can choose how often they want to work for them. They can choose the type of work that they deeply value, that they want to contribute to an organization. So I think that model and the evolution of that model and how it's growing right now is a really fascinating trend. And I think it's actually great for the function. I think the other piece is, and Daniel and I talked about this, was the idea of like, there is not a one size fits all CPO, right? Like, I feel like I'm great for AlertMedia, but I'm not great for every company. My skills, my experience, my style, who I am is probably not the right fit for every company. My experience with industries, the size of organizations I work in, right? All those dimensions I think are really important to consider if you're an HR leader, but also for a CEO choosing their next HR leader is, what does your organization need most right now at this stage of growth, and based off of the business strategy that you have and where you're going, because that CHRO might be a very different human today than it's going to be 5 years from now.
So I want to go back to something that you said in that prep call, and it was that rather than focusing on all of the negatives, and there are a lot of negatives. People are burnt out. The job is really hard. The job has changed a lot over the last, 4 or 5 years and continues to change every single day. So, how do we what's the positive spin on this?
Yeah.
Because we see all the negative takes on LinkedIn. That seems to be what gets all of the attention. But I appreciate how you have a more positive outlook on this, and you are looking at the light at the end of the tunnel, whether that's more options for CPOs outside of just working in HR or in house. What are some of the other positives that you see coming? How can we lean
Yeah.
into this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really excited about the role we're playing in helping organizations transform and drive change, right? Like every day when I wake up, it's like, what is the impact that I can create? And I think that people need to go back to that is it goes to choose the right organization for you. So just building off my last point is choose the right company, choose the right leadership team that really embraces your strengths personally and professionally, because I think that is really core. I think for me to be successful, even at AlertMedia, my peer group of my executive leadership team, they have to trust me and I have to trust them. And we have to all be looking towards a common purpose. And so when I think about that positivity, I share those as examples from my own experience, but I think that they're core tenets for what there is to be exciting. And it's about how are you thinking about your role differently in the workplace? How are you thinking about the impact you want to have as a CPO? How are you thinking about, with the evolving workforce, what is our unique ability to influence the world at work, right? To influence culture, to influence how you build the next generation of leaders through coaching, through growth, through development. It's funny. I'm sure everyone's like, yeah, this is all the same. It is all the same. And I think people need to remember you went into this profession for a reason. I don't think everyone's a great HR leader. I think this role requires a unique skill set and a unique human. And there's varieties of them and flavors of them. But I think kind of going through change, just like we help our workforce through change, it's kind of that moment of what are you going to embrace? What's there to be excited about? But you need to chart your own course. And you need to identify what do you want at this next stage of your career as an HR leader? And then what is the impact you want to make? I know the impact I want to make. And I try every day to wake up and figure out how do I unlock the potential of that impact through my actions, through my team, through my leaders. And that's what makes me excited about what's to come.
I love the positivity. I ditto to what Daniel said earlier. I think there's so much that is sensationalized in our space. And I think that's just a function of how the media world and content and how we consume information, a lot of it has to do with that. And so it's fresh to have a positive perspective. And that feels weird saying that. It shouldn't be the fresh
Well,
perspective, shouldn't be a positive outlook.
it's
Go ahead,
almost like
Daniel.
taking the control back.
Yeah.
Rather than thinking all of this stuff is happening to me or us in the HR profession, it's how can I take the control back and chart my own path?
Totally.
What's the impact that I want to have? And if it's not at the company I'm at now, how do I find another job where I can do that?
Right. And maybe I no longer, this path it's been repaved or it looks different now, is also what I'm hearing and what Jenna, you're saying. And the reality is, the good news is HR has to be more strategic. Like that, everything is setting that up. With that comes, it's not all culture events and fringe benefits and testing the latest and greatest HR concept that is employee friendly. It's sometimes that will be included and sometimes that will not be included, but the path forward seems to be one of that's data driven and that is business case oriented. and like, what is the real business case for this? And if you don't like doing that, and I know a lot of HR people that's not their jam. That is not what they signed up for. That's not why they got into this field 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. But there are others that are like, oh, wow, that is like exactly my language. And so I really have enjoyed this conversation because it is like the first time I've taken a positive look at this. So in a while, it's been a while, but I think we're at a point now where we do have to turn the corner. And so our next tradition on the show is what we call rapid fire questions. It's the same set of questions we ask every guest. And you ready to do this?
Let's go.
Excellent. First question. How do you define a modern people leader? What are the traits and characteristics?
Yeah, I think a modern people leader, deeply cares, is continuously curious, builds their depth of expertise of kind of what their business needs most from them, and is able to adapt and grow with it. And I think is always looking forward, always for looking what's next and preparing for what you don't know just as much as what you do.
All right, next question. If you could go back in time and talk to a 22-year-old Jenna, what career advice would you give yourself and why?
I would tell her to be present. I've always been focused on what's next. And I will tell you, in this moment of my life, I'm more present than I've ever been. And I wish I would have been more present. I was so excited about what I was doing, but I was also so excited about what it was jumping to or what it was helping me achieve. And I just wonder if I would have embraced the moment a little bit more, what else could I have possibly gotten out of it?
What does being more present look like for you?
I think it's not even thinking about what's next, but what's right now, right? For me, what's right now is like, how can I be an exceptional mom to my two beautiful children? Mm-hmm. How can I be exceptional in my job, right? So like the role that I'm in right now, what am I learning every day? How am I making an impact on AlertMedia and on our people? How am I in a meeting and just really focusing on what I'm hearing from people and like, what does that mean to me, and creating that space to be really reflective about what can I do differently? Like, where do I need to grow? Where do I need to change? I think I was always focused on what is the skill I'm building right this moment for what I need to have next versus what am I growing and developing right now because it's the right thing for me and the right thing for the organization to have me focused on.
I love that. That answer really hits for me. Last question. Is there anything you believe to be true about the world of work, but don't yet have the data to support?
This one's hard for me. I've been thinking a lot about like things like this. I love to find data. Like, I'm a problem solver. I do have a hypothesis that organizations who share performance ratings are less successful than those who don't. And the reason I believe, and there is research on it, but like there still seems to be a lot of like skepticism on it. But I'm a firm believer that like you really impact psychological safety when you give someone a number versus like truly giving them the key messages they need to be successful, and they know like what they're accomplishing versus what they need to work on. You completely dilute the message when you give someone a number, because no one's a number. It's people are words, but they're not numbers. So I don't know. That's my philosophy around performance.
I think a lot of people could get behind that. And there's one more question that I left off this doc, but who do we need to have on the show next? Like, is there anybody in your immediate network that you think maybe isn't getting the recognition that they deserve and they're a brilliant people leader? Or it could be somebody that you follow on LinkedIn that you would just love to hear from on the podcast. Like,
Yeah, I met someone the other day that really inspired me. And she's the chief performance officer at Logic Monitor, Eileen. And I think you guys should talk to her because what I love about her role is she's the chief performance officer, but she's the leader of people. She's a leader of strategy, and she really is the perfect marriage of the two. When I think about her role, I thought it was really interesting. And I thought her just overall kind of view on HR and what we're doing is really interesting. And then I have to leave you with is you should talk to my sister because she's my biggest role model and my biggest critic and my biggest cheerleader. And she inspired me to pursue my career. And I'm so grateful for that every day.
Oh my God. Yeah. We won't forget about also the group episode, the sisters episode. Well, those are great suggestions. And we honored to have any and all of those recommendations on the show. And we've officially made it to the final tradition, which we call one word or phrase close. We all respond with a word or a few words, just as we reflect on the last hour, amazing conversation we've had, how we want to wrap things up. And again, we like our guests to go first.
All right. Well, based off this conversation, I think I'm going to leave you with is have an open mind, right? Think about the possibilities versus the impossibilities.
I'm going to go with positivity.
I'm going to say embrace the change.
Love it.
I was
Jenna,
actually going to say embrace the chaos, but
you can embrace both.
Yeah.
Embrace both.
Embrace the chaos and the change.
Yes. I like that.
Love it. Because there's going to be plenty of chaos, that's for sure. So chaos and change. Well,
where the fun happens.
Jenna, well, and that's what I love about this conversation, because it's just a reminder that change can happen, chaos can happen, but you can still have a positive outlook and you can still harness that for better good of the company and the world in your case, as you guys help keep employees safe. So this was an absolute blast. Thank you so much for joining. And I'm looking forward to this future conversation that we're manifesting. So
same here. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.